Chapter 5. Geralt looked out of the palace window for the last time. Dusk was falling rapidly. Beyond the lake, the distant lights of Wyzim twinkled. There was a wilderness around the old palace. A strip of no man's land with which, over 7 years, the town had cut itself off from this dangerous place, leaving nothing but a few ruins, rotten beams, the remains of a gap-toothed palisade, which had obviously not been worth dismantling and moving. As far away as possible, at the opposite end of the settlement, the king had built his new residence. The stout tower of his new palace loomed black in the distance, against the darkening blue of the sky. In one of the empty, plundered chambers, the Witcher returned to the dusty table at which he was preparing calmly and meticulously. He knew he had plenty of time. The Striga would not leave her crypt before midnight. On the table in front of him, he had a small chest with metal fittings. He opened it. Inside, packed tightly in compartments lined with dried grass, stood small vials of dark glass. The Witcher removed 3. From the floor, he picked up an oblong packet, thickly wrapped in sheep's skins and fastened with a leather strap. He unwrapped it and pulled out a sword with an elaborate hilt, in a black, shiny scabbard covered with rows of runic signs and symbols. He drew the blade, which lit up with a pure shine of mirror-like brightness. It was pure silver. Geralt whispered an incantation and drank one after the other, the contents of 2 vials, placing his left hand on the blade of the sword after each sip. Then, wrapping himself tightly in his black coat, he sat down on the floor. There were no chairs in the chamber, or in the rest of the palace. He sat motionless, his eyes closed, his breathing, at first even, suddenly quickened, became rasping and tense, and then stopped completely. The mixture which helped the Witcher gain full control of his body was chiefly made up of veratrum, stramonium, hawthorn, and spurge. The other ingredients had no name in any human language. For anyone who was not like Geralt, inured to it from childhood, it would have been lethal poison. The Witcher turned his head abruptly. In the silence, his hearing, sharpened beyond measure, easily picked out a rustle of footsteps through the courtyard overgrown with stinging nettles. It could not be the Striga. The steps were too light. Geralt threw his sword across his back, hid his bundle in the hearth of the ruined chimney place, and silently, as a bat, ran downstairs. It was still light enough in the courtyard for the approaching man to see the Witcher's face. The man, Ostrid, backed away abruptly. An involuntary grimace of terror and repulsion contorted his lips. The Witcher smiled wryly. He knew what he looked like. After drinking a mixture of Banewart, monk's hood, and eyebright, the face takes on the color of chalk, and the pupils fill the entire iris. But the mixture enables one to see in the deepest darkness, and this is what Geralt wanted. Ostrid quickly regained control. "You look like as if you were already a corpse, Witcher," he said. "From fear, no doubt. Don't be afraid. I bring you reprieve." The Witcher did not reply. "Don't you hear what I say, you Rivian charlatan? You're saved, and rich." Ostrid hefted a sizable purse in his hand and threw it at Geralt's feet. 1,000 orens. Take it, go on, your horse, and get out of here. The Rivian still said nothing. "Don't gawp at me," Ostrid raised his voice, "and don't waste any time. I have no intention of standing here until midnight. Don't you understand? I do not wish for you to undo the spell. No. You haven't guessed. I am not in league with Velerad and Segalin. I don't want you to kill her. You are simply to leave. Everything is to stay as it is." The Witcher did not move. He did not want the magnate to realize how fast his movements and reactions now were. It was quickly growing dark. a relief as even the semi-darkness of dusk was too bright for his dilated pupils. "And why, sir, is everything to remain as it is?" he asked, trying to enunciate each word slowly. "Now, that," Ostrit raised his head proudly, "should really be of damn little concern to you." "And what if I already know?" "Go on." "It will be easier to remove Foltest from the throne if the Striga frightens the people even more. If the royal madness completely disgusts both magnates and common folk. Am I right? I came here by way of Redania and Novigrad. There is much talk there that there are those in Wyzim who look to King Vizimir as their savior and true monarch. But I, Lord Ostrit, do not care about politics, or the successions to thrones, or revolutions in palaces. I am here to accomplish my task. Have you ever heard of a sense of responsibility and plain honesty? About professional ethics?" "Careful to whom you speak, you vagabond!" Ostrit yelled furiously, placing his hand on the hilt of his sword. "I have had enough of this. I am not accustomed to such discussions. Look at you, ethics, codes, of practice, morality. Who are you to talk? A brigand who's barely arrived before he starts murdering men, who bends double to Foltest and behind his back bargains with Velerad like a hired thug. And you dare to turn your nose up at me, you serf. Play at being a knowing one, a magician. You scheming witcher, be gone before I run my flat of my sword across your gob." The witcher did not stir. He stood calmly. "You'd better leave, Lord Ostrit," he said. "It's growing dark." Ostrit took a step back, drew his sword in a flash. "You asked for this, you sorcerer. I'll kill you. Your tricks won't help you. I carry a turtle stone." Geralt smiled. The reputation of Turtlestone was as mistaken as it was popular, but the Witcher was not going to lose his strength on spells, much less expose his silver sword to contact with Ostrit's blade. He dived under the whirling blade, and, with the heel of his hand and his silver-studded cuff, hit him in the temple. Part 6. Ostrit quickly regained consciousness and looked around in the total darkness. He noticed that he was tied up. He did not see Geralt standing right beside him, but he realized where he was and let out a prolonged, terrifying howl. "Keep quiet," said the Witcher. "Otherwise you'll lure her out before her time." "You damned murderer! Where are you? Untie me immediately, you louse! You'll hang for this, you son of a bitch!" "Quiet!" Ostrit panted heavily. "You're leaving me here to be devoured by her? Tied up?" he asked, quieter now, whispering a vile invective. "No," said the Witcher. "I'll let you go, but not now." "You scoundrel!" hissed Ostrit. "To distract the Striga?" "Yes." Ostrit didn't say anything. He stopped wriggling and lay quietly. "Witcher?" "Yes. It's true that I wanted to overthrow Foltest. I'm not the only one, but I am the only one who wanted him dead. I wanted him to die in agony, to go mad, and to rot alive. Do you understand why?" Geralt remained silent. "I loved Ada, the king's sister, the king's mistress, the king's trollop. I loved her. Witcher, are you there?" "I am." "I know what you're thinking, but it wasn't like that. Believe me, I didn't cast any spells. I don't know anything about magic. Only once, in anger, did I say, only once. Witcher, are you listening?" "I am." "It's his mother, the old queen. It must be her. She couldn't watch him and Ada. It wasn't me. I only once, tried to persuade them. But Ada, Witcher, I was besotted and said, Witcher, was it me? Me? It doesn't matter anymore. Witcher, is it nearly midnight? It's close. Let me go. Give me more time. No. Ostrid did not hear the scrape of the tomb lid being moved aside, but the Witcher did. He leaned over and, with his dagger, cut the magnate's bonds. Ostrid did not wait for the word. He jumped up, numb, hobbled clumsily, and ran. His eyes had grown accustomed enough to the darkness for him to see his way from the main hall to the exit. The slab blocking the entrance to the crypt opened and fell to the floor with a thud. Geralt, prudently behind the staircase balustrade, saw the misshapen figure of the Striga speeding swiftly and unerringly in the direction of Ostrid's receding footsteps. Not the slightest sound issued from the Striga. A terrible, quivering, frenzied scream tore the night, shook the old walls, continued rising and falling, vibrating. The Witcher couldn't make out exactly how far away it was. His sharpened hearing deceived him. He knew that the Striga had caught up with Ostrid quickly. Too quickly. He stepped into the middle of the hall, stood right at the entrance to the crypt. He threw down his coat, twitched his shoulders, adjusted the position of his sword, pulled on his gauntlets. He still had some time. He knew that the Striga, although well fed after the last full moon, would not readily abandon Ostrid's corpse. The heart and liver were, for her, valuable reserves of nutrition for the long periods spent in lethargic sleep. The Witcher waited. By his count, there were about 3 hours left until dawn. The cock's crow would only mislead him. Besides, there were probably no cocks in the neighborhood. He heard her. She was trudging slowly, shuffling along the floor, and then he saw her. The description had been accurate. The disproportionately large head set on a short neck was surrounded by a tangled curly halo of reddish hair. Her eyes shone in the darkness like an animal's. The Striga stood motionless, her gaze fixed on Geralt. Suddenly she opened her jaws, as if proud of her rows of pointed white teeth, then snapped them shut with a crack like a chest being closed, and leapt, slashing at the Witcher with her bloodied claws. Geralt jumped to the side, spun a swift pirouette. The Striga rubbed against him, also spun around, slicing through the air with her talons. She didn't lose her balance and attacked anew, mid-spin, gnashing her teeth fractions of an inch from Geralt's chest. Changing the direction of his spin with a fluttering pirouette to confuse the Striga. As he leapt away, he dealt a hard blow to the side of her head with a silver spike studding the knuckles of his gauntlet. The Striga roared horribly, filling the palace with a booming echo, fell to the ground, froze, and started to howl hollowly and furiously. The Witcher smiled maliciously. His first attempt, as he had hoped, had gone well. Silver was fatal to the Striga, as it was for most monsters brought into existence through magic. So there was a chance the beast was like the others, and that boded well for lifting the spell, while the silver sword would, as a last resort, assure his life. The Striga was in no hurry with her next attack. She approached slowly, baring her fangs dribbling repulsively. Geralt backed away and carefully placing his feet traced a semicircle. By slowing and quickening his movements, he distracted the Striga, making it difficult for her to leap. As he walked, the Witcher unwound a long, strong silver chain, weighed at the end. The moment the Striga tensed and leapt, the chain whistled through the air and, coiling like a snake, twined itself around the monster's shoulders, neck, and head. The Striga's jump became a tumble, and she let out an ear-piercing whistle. She thrashed around on the floor, howling horribly with fury or from the burning pain inflicted by the despised metal. Geralt was content. If he wanted, he could kill the Striga without great difficulty. But the Witcher did not draw his sword. Nothing in the Striga's behavior had given him reason to think she might be an incurable case. Geralt moved to a safer distance, and, without letting the writhing shape on the floor out of his sight, breathed deeply, focused himself. The chain snapped. The silver links scattered like rain in all directions, ringing against the stone. The Striga, blind with fury, tumbled to the attack, roaring. Geralt waited calmly, and with his raised hand, traced the sign of Ard in front of him. The Striga fell back as if hit by a mallet, but kept her feet, extended her talons, bared her fangs. Her hair stood on end and fluttered as if she were walking against the fierce wind. With difficulty, one rasping step at a time, she slowly advanced, but she did advance. Geralt grew uneasy. He did not expect such a simple sign to paralyze the Striga entirely, but neither did he expect the beast to overcome it so easily. He could not hold the sign for long. It was too exhausting, and the Striga had no more than 10 steps to go. He lowered the sign suddenly and sprung aside. The Striga, taken by surprise, flew forward, lost her balance, fell, slid along the floor, and tumbled down the stairs into the crypt's entrance, yawning in the floor. Her infernal scream reverberated from below. To gain time, Geralt jumped onto the stairs leading to the gallery. He had not even climbed halfway up when the Striga ran out of the crypt, speeding along like an enormous black spider. The Witcher waited until he had run up the stairs after him, then leaped over the balustrade. The Striga turned on the stairs, sprang and flew at him in an amazing 10-meter leap. She did not let herself be deceived by his pirouettes this time. Twice her talons left their mark on the Rivian's leather tunic, but another desperately hard blow from the silver spiked gauntlet threw the Striga aside, shook her. Geralt, feeling fury building inside him, swayed, bent backward, and, with a mighty kick, knocked the beast off her legs. The roar she gave was louder than all the previous ones. Even the plaster crumbled from the ceiling. The Striga sprang up, shaking with uncontrolled anger and lust for murder. Geralt waited. He drew his sword, traced circles with it in the air, and skirted the Striga, taking care that the movement of his sword was not in rhythm with his steps. The Striga did not jump. She approached slowly, following the bright streak of the blade with her eyes. Geralt stopped abruptly, froze with his sword raised. The Striga, disconcerted, also stopped. The Witcher traced a slow semicircle with the blade, took a step in the Striga's direction, then another. Then he leapt, feigning a whirling movement with his sword above her head. The Striga curled up, retreated in a zigzag. Geralt was close again, the blade shimmering in his hand. His eyes lit up with an ominous glow. A hoarse roar tore through his clenched teeth. The Striga backed away, pushed by the power of concentrated hatred, anger, and violence, which emanated from the attacking man and struck her in waves, penetrating her mind and body. Terrified and pained by feelings unknown to her, she let out a thin, shaking squeak, turned on the spot, and ran off in a desperate, crazy escape down the dark tangle of the palace's corridors. Geralt stood quivering in the middle of the hall, alone. It had taken a long time, he thought, before this dance on the edge of an abyss, this mad, macabre ballet of a fight, had achieved the desired effect, allowed him to psychically become one with his opponent, to reach the underlayers of concentrated will which permeated the Striga, the evil, twisted will from which the Striga was born. The Witcher shivered at the memory of taking on that evil to redirect it, as if in a mirror, against the monster. Never before had he come across such a concentration of hatred and murderous frenzy, not even from basilisks, who enjoyed a ferocious reputation for it. All the better, he thought as he walked toward the crypt entrance and the blackness that spread from it like an enormous puddle. All the better, all the stronger, was the blow received by the Striga. This would give him a little more time until the beast recovered from the shock. The Witcher doubted whether he could repeat such an effort. The elixirs were weakening, and it was still a long time until dawn. But the Striga could not return to her crypt before first light, or all his trouble would come to nothing. He went down the stairs. The crypt was not large. There was room for 3 stone sarcophagi. The slab covering the first was half pushed aside. Geralt pulled the 3rd vial from beneath his tunic, quickly drank its contents, climbed into the tomb, and stretched out in it. As he had expected, it was a double tomb for mother and daughter. He had only just pulled the cover closed when he heard the Striga's roar again. He lay on his back next to Ada's mummified corpse and traced the sign of Irden on the inside of the slab. He laid his sword on his chest, stood a tiny hourglass filled with phosphorescent sand next to it, and crossed his arms. He no longer heard the Striga's screams as she searched the palace. He had gradually stopped hearing anything as the true love and Celadine began to work.